we wake, hear the birds and see the sun.
My twin sister, Anna Rose Bain, and I have started a yearly tradition of going on a trip together just to hike, explore, photograph, and of course, paint. This year we chose the Oregon coast since we'd never been there before and heard great things about the Pacific Northwest. This trip was amazing. The Oregon coast lives up to the hype. Everywhere you look is a potential painting, and I can see why it has inspired so many artists over the years, including one of my favorite watercolor artists, Steve Hanks, who did so many beautiful atmospheric figure paintings in Oregon. Welcome to Harris Beach. Here we are. It's amazing. I had a chance while on location to try out at least 4 different travel painting setups. So in this video, I'll show you guys the different paint sets I used, why I chose them for each specific location, and what my thought process was for choosing what to paint and how to approach each subject. We booked a 2-night stay in Brookings, and our first stop of the trip was Harris Beach State Park right at sunset. One of the hardest things about plein air painting is simply narrowing it down and choosing what to paint. It's been a few years since I'd been to the ocean, so I was feeling the burden of overchoice and sensory overload. Sometimes the easiest thing to do is just to choose the most obvious thing, especially when you're short on time, the conditions are chilly and windy, and the light is rapidly changing. In this case, we both decided to paint this large sunlit rock rising from the ocean. It's one of the most distinctive attractions at this beach. I sat on a large piece of driftwood and used my Daniel Smith Ultimate Mixing Pan set and my Paul Rubens hot pressed cotton watercolor paper block just on my lap. I like to use hot pressed paper when I'm working small and fast because the paint goes on really smoothly and it dries quickly. Meanwhile, Anna did a great little oil painting. It was a satisfying start to our trip, and even though we were tired from our travels, we both felt so excited to explore the next day. Wow, so this is Harris Beach. It's like 5 minutes from our hotel. We're in Brookings, Oregon. And look at that light. Oh my gosh.
This is only day 1.
How are we gonna fit all the paintings in? I don't know. I'm overwhelmed.
You just want me to clear the way for all the bugs.
Good thing we left the bug spray in the car.
Don't worry, I'll get all the spider webs too.
Thanks. What do we choose? The way of light or the path of darkness? Anna, I'm disappointed in you. On the second day of our trip, we did lots of short drives to various scenic overlooks and state parks, taking tons of photos along the way. Our first painting spot was overlooking Lone Ranch Beach. Now, unbeknownst to the other, we each chose a similar location. You can see I hiked up a bit higher than Anna, but like her, I was drawn to the hazy mountain layers, unique rock shapes, and the stark pine tree in my foreground. There wasn't any comfortable place to sit up here, so I set up my New Wave Yugo tripod and 6x8-inch pochade box. I try to only bring items that will squeeze into a backpack, especially when lots of walking or hiking are involved. So this is my favorite standing plein air setup because it's so compact and relatively light. My paper was a Winsor Newton 7x10-inch block of cotton cold-pressed paper. I always carry a canvas zipper case with my pencils, and for brushes, I have my Silver Black Velvet and Richardson Gray Matters Bullet travel brushes. These are just the best. With this particular pochade box, I use a metal tin because it's magnetic, and for this trip, I had my Sennelier set of 12 half pans. Other necessary supplies include my Faber-Castell collapsible water cup, a spray bottle, and an old towel. I also made sure to put on sunscreen and wore a wide-brimmed hat for protection. I do a light sketch before I paint so I can really nail down my composition. To create the look of those hazy rocks off in the distance, I pre-wet the paper so that the ocean and the sky blend together, and while the light blue areas are still damp, I drop in some soft grays. I was really happy with the color and value of the blended wet washes off on the distant hazy shore, and I liked my little pine tree in the foreground, which I idealized somewhat and filled it out to make it more shapely. But honestly, some of my rocks were a little too dark in value. There are always things in a painting that I'm happy with and things that I wish I'd done better. It's just part of the learning process. Hey, so here's my finished painting. I was pretty happy with how it turned out. And this place is just the most beautiful place. I'm in heaven. So we're gonna see where else we can explore and paint some more. For our next adventure, we traveled about 30 minutes south to the northern part of California, where we visited the Jedediah Smith Redwood State Park. This was my first encounter with redwood trees, and it was an unforgettable, reverent experience. While Anna explored and took pictures, I decided to try another painting. I found a comfortable, huge fallen tree to sit on, and since I was sitting and not standing, I was able to try my Portable Painter Classic hands-free palette for the first time. To watch my complete review on this little gem of a travel palette, be sure to click on this thumbnail at the end. Before the trip, I had filled this palette with my Daniel Smith set of 6 primary colors and a set of Primatech colors, which are these beautiful, earthy, granulating paints. I wasn't sure how much I would use those, but I found myself dipping into the Jadeite Genuine and the Piemontite Genuine all the time just to match those rich purples and greens that you see in a redwood forest. Sketching and painting with the paints balanced across one leg and my Paul Rubens watercolor paper block propped up on the palette was actually really comfortable, except for the occasional pestering mosquito. As you can see from the time lapse, the light changed a lot and I lost some of my sunlit patches in the forest by overworking the painting a little bit, but overall I was so happy I had a chance to paint in the midst of the redwoods. Wild blackberries! Just coming down the trail to the shoreline. After dinner, we headed to the Lone Ranch Beach to try and squeeze in one more painting session. It was a gorgeous, clear evening, but we put on some layers to keep warm in that chilly ocean breeze. The sunset was magical, and I felt so grateful to be doing what I love in such a beautiful place. At this location, again, I used my standing easel and Sennelier paints, this time with my ArtsiRosi Handmade Arches paper journal. I tried doing too much at first, honestly. I quickly realized I needed to narrow my scope. So I erased that, started over, and instead I painted this solitary sunlit rock in front of the cliff with the ocean waves crashing around it and reflections on the sand. I wanted so badly to capture those crashing waves, but this one little wave I managed to include looked kind of tiny. Now, since it was my first time painting waves from life, I cut myself some slack, and it was definitely an awesome challenge. On day 3, we headed north towards Coos Bay, finding lots of amazing state parks and overlooks on the way. Sisters Rock State Park was a highlight with this incredible hidden sea cave you could hike down into. These were our fish tacos for lunch. We definitely savored the seafood while we were on the coast. Near Coos Bay, we found a lovely state park called Sunset Bay, where we enjoyed those classic Oregon coast views of tree-covered rocky shores.
Will this do? Adequate painting spot?
Kinda sucks. Just kidding. I sat on a log and used my DIY magnetic plein air setup with Daniel Smith pan paints. For a complete video on this cheap and easy to make setup, click on this thumbnail at the end of the video. I tried a different approach with this painting, beginning with a sketch outlined in pen. The clouds were moving in and out, but it was really mostly flat and overcast, not exactly ideal for plein air painting, so I thought maybe some bolder outlines might help strengthen the drawing. My paper was Arches cold pressed, and I used lots of soft, wet on wet layers to just slowly build up color and value. Day 4 was cool and cloudy, but sometimes a location or a snapshot just speaks to you. And this abstract tide pool between the rocks looked so interesting and fun to paint, so I set up my gear right on the trail. Because I was standing right near the fence, I was able to balance my portable painter on the wooden rail and rest my Paul Rubens paper block next to that. Both were at a comfortable height for me to just stand and paint. The hands-free setup was stable, and by now on day 4, I was feeling more confident to just settle in and enjoy the process of sketching and painting, minus the nervous energy I was experiencing those first few days. I noticed that this daily practice was helping me feel more relaxed. There can be intense pressure when you feel stressed about painting, or like painting outdoors is some sort of precious and scarce commodity, and that can negatively affect how your painting turns out. But with several days under my belt of painting freely and without distraction, I felt like I was finally beginning to hit my stride, and aside from making the rocks a little too yellow and being interrupted by constant foot traffic on the trail, I was really happy with my painting. Our last full day on the coast was packed with more sightseeing adventures. Our first painting stop was at Yaquina Head Lighthouse, where we both chose to paint the most obvious thing again. While there were lots of places to sit here, I opted for my standing easel just to get a better perspective. Now, straight lines and architectural details are a fun departure from the more organic subject matter which I'd been painting all week. I used one of the side panels for my easel as a ruler to help draw on those straight edges. Cannon Beach was our final destination, and it was the most magical beach I've ever seen. On the damp sand, it made sense to stand with an easel again. I used my Winsor Newton 7x10" block and had so much fun painting wet and wet to create the soft blend of colors on Cannon Beach's famous Haystack rock and that foggy, distant shore. I used a lot of ultramarine and burnt sienna for this painting. This was one of the few times where Anna and I both painted the same subject side by side. Watercolor tends to be quicker than oil, which is what Anna works with, so I finished before she did, and she made a knockout painting. Be sure to follow her on Instagram and check out her channel here on YouTube. The sunset was spectacular. My ninth and final painting was on the beach again. I wandered quite a way down the shore just south of Haystack Rock and sat on a log with my portable painter and hot-pressed Paul Rubens block. Although we had a time constraint, like a flight to catch later, I still felt confident and relaxed enough to take my time and try and pull out as much color, texture, and beauty from the dark rocks as I could. These Daniel Smith Primatech colors were so helpful for this. Look at that gorgeous granulation. It's just perfect for rocks. I also threw in a couple of people and birds just to give it some life and a sense of scale. Meanwhile, Anna did a ridiculously good oil painting of the beach with driftwood and rocks, and we both just came away from this trip feeling filled to the brim. Here are all 9 paintings laid out on my desk when I got home. Thanks for allowing me to share my Oregon Coast experience with you all. Leave me a comment. I'd love to hear from you about a memorable outdoor painting experience you've had. Oh, and maybe some ideas for the next Twin Art Inspo trip. If you've traveled somewhere, I want to hear about it. Let me know. Thanks for watching, and see you soon.